As promised, I'm reporting on the results of the E-squared experiment. The book says 9 do-it-yourself energy experiments that prove your thoughts create your reality. As I mentioned in my earlier video, I had given this a try twice before, and personally, it didn't prove anything to me. So I thought I would give it a third try and see how that worked out. At the start of the book, Pam Groot talks about what she calls the field of potentiality. The rest of the book is broken down into the 9 different experiments. So she gives a bit of information about each experiment with examples from people she knows or her own life. She gives you a description of how to do the experiment, and then each experiment has a lab report sheet. So she talks about the principle, the theory, what's the overriding question, as in does the field of potentiality exist? There's the hypothesis, so it's written out as a scientific experiment. There's the timeline. You record the date that you started the experiment with the time that it will finish. So for experiment 1, it's 48 hours. You make note of the deadline, the approach that you use during the experiment. So again, in the example of number 1, you're asking for a blessing and you want proof within 48 hours that cannot be written off as coincidence. So you're very clear and concise in what you're asking for. As I said, each time I have tried this, so this is now time number 3, that one has not worked for me. It doesn't mean that there isn't something out there. It just means experiment 1 has not been successful for me. So what were the results for me the third time? Well, like the 2 other times that I've tried this, exercise 1 was a bust. And I tried it twice. With experiment number 2, I actually switched it up a bit. There's 2 different parts to it. Again, it's 48 hours and you're asking the universe to prove, or you're asking the field of potentiality to prove that there is something to this. Your thoughts create your reality. Now, during the first 24 hours, you're to look for a car in a specific color. Again, when I tried this the other times, it really didn't prove anything, and this time was no different. The second half of the experiment, I switched up because she says to ask to see butterflies. And for me, that was a bit of a cheat because 1, it's currently winter in Ontario, so I'm not going to be seeing them outside. 2, I have butterflies on my books, on a variety of decorative boxes. So for me, asking for that particular proof was not reasonable. So I decided to switch that up and ask for crows. Now, in my area, it's common to see 1 or 2 crows at any given time of the day. So it would have to be something very different and above and beyond the regular 1 or 2. And I have to say, in this case, it most absolutely was. Now, I go out every afternoon to feed the birds and the feral cats. On this particular day when I went out, and I sometimes sit and just watch the birds as they arrive. Sometimes one of the cats will come through, sometimes not. But I happened on this day to be sitting out, and what I noticed within a 1-hour period were 11 crows, all flying around, heading in different directions, and that is very unusual. Now, as I've said before, Just because I've read something and I happen to see maybe a clue or a hint, it doesn't mean, oh, that's absolute proof. So I went out the next day around the same time period to see, is this going to happen again? And it did not. And I even looked, I spent the next couple days looking out the window or when I was sitting outside, really paying attention. And that was the only day in that 1 hour period where there were 11 crows around. So I have to give that part a win. In experiment number 3, you make your own dowsing rods, and the concept is that as you're holding the rods, and you can make them from old coat hangers, you think about one particular emotion and watch the way the rods move. Then you think about the opposite emotion and see what happens with the rods. I skipped this particular exercise because I'm well aware of how our emotions impact energy. One, because for over 20 years, I've worked with different energy healing modalities, such as therapeutic touch and Reiki. I also happen to be empathic, which means that when I'm near people, even if they're not giving it away by their facial expression or their words, I can sense and feel what's going on. And yes, that does explain why I tend to avoid crowds and I am very selective about who I spend my time with. So I already know how our energy and our thoughts impact everything and everyone around us. So I didn't need proof on that one. Number 4, you're asking the field of potentiality to manifest something within 48 hours, and again, cannot be written off as coincidence. Because the point is to prove to yourself that what you're thinking and what you're expecting is what you bring into your world. What I decided this time, because it couldn't be written off as coincidence, was to win on a scratch ticket. So during the 48 hours, I bought 2 scratch tickets and they both turned out to be winners. Neither one was a massive winner, but in my world, if I get the money back from the cost of the ticket with a few extra dollars extra, then I'm happy. Experiment number 5 is asking about a specific yes or no answer to your question. And again, this takes 48 hours. And in this case, the question that I asked did get a definite answer, so I was quite pleased with that. Experiment number 6 is the longest because it takes 7 days. In this experiment, you plant beans and you send them positive energy for the 7 days. I didn't do experiment number 6 because years ago I read Messages from Water, so I'm aware from that book and those examples how energy impacts not just the plants around us, but water as well. And 2, when I plant, I always send my plants Reiki. So for me, part of the process is not just digging the hole and putting the plant or tree into the ground. It's also doing a quiet Reiki energy sending for the health and benefit of that plant, as well as everything that will rely on it, whether that's insects or birds, etc. So again, I already knew that our energy and our thoughts impact the life around us. I also skipped experiment number 7, which involves focusing on the food that you're eating and the thoughts that you have about it and how you feel after you're eating, regardless of what your diet is. Now, for myself, I believe that all life is sentient. So whether that's animal, plant, or mineral. Months ago, I began focusing on gratitude for my food, regardless of what I was eating. If I have a slice of pizza, Before I start eating, I go through all the ingredients that made the pizza possible. So I think quietly to myself, I thank the chicken for the eggs, I thank the grains, I thank the yeast, the water, the salt, because all of that makes up the crust. I thank the cow for the cheese. I thank the tomatoes that make up the sauce. I thank the herbs and spices that flavor the sauce, and all the other ingredients that may be on the type of pizza that I'm eating that day. In other words, I say a quiet thank you to everything that has been sacrificed to support my life. I have to say, in the several months since I began doing that, I have noticed a difference in how I feel, how much I enjoy the different foods that I eat, and how much more energy I have afterwards. So for me, feeling grateful and giving thanks is just is just part of having a meal or a snack now. The point of experiment 7 is that your thoughts and your energy impact the food that you're eating and how that in turn comes into your system. So if you're feeling guilty about what you're eating, then that's going to end up impacting how you feel and the rest of your thoughts. Experiment number 8 is about sending a message telepathically to someone and within 48 hours getting a sign that they've received it. So in this case, I decided to send a message to someone that they would text me. Like experiment number 1, this one did not work and I did not hear anything back. Do I think telepathy is bogus? No, there have been other examples throughout my life and different things I've read and researched that it certainly works effectively for some people. It just did not happen to work for me with this particular experiment. Experiment number 9 is about being mindful and aware of all the beauty and wonderful things that surround you. And again, this is 48 hours, and you focus on all the beauty, random acts of kindness that you may receive. The point of the exercise is that the more you focus on the things that are going right and the beauty that surrounds you, the more of it that you will notice in your life. Again, I skipped this particular exercise because I'm very aware of how that works. And what I began doing a number of months ago, before every night before I go to sleep, is to go through the list of blessings and gratitude that I've received throughout the day. I've always had a number of different things throughout the day, whether that's having a cuddle with Zena as I'm reading a book. It may be the beauty of seeing a hawk and being able to get a video. It could be finally finishing a book that I've been wanting to get done for a while. It can be any number of things. In other words, what you're looking for aren't, winning Lotto Max. And don't get me wrong, that would be awesome. But it's looking for the everyday, everyone has some type of blessing and something to be grateful for. So the more that you focus on that and become aware of it, and the more that you can keep your thoughts looking at the blessings and gratitudes rather than maybe a difficulty or a challenge, the more that you'll notice what's going right in your life versus what you're trying to get through just to make it through the day. It was good going through the exercises, even though I skipped a number of them, but I skipped them because I already knew about the results that I could expect because I've experienced that type of thing in my life before. The author finishes the book with a series of questions that you can go through if you belong to a book club, or maybe you have a friend who would enjoy going through this with you. Someday, when I have enough subs that I can begin doing live chats, I think I would enjoy having one of the chats talking about E squared and finding out what other people thought about it. If you've read E squared, let me know down below what were your thoughts about it, and did you go through the exercises and find that they were effective? When I picked up E squared, my bookstore also had E cubed, which I picked up because sometimes what I found is when I've seen a book and I've hummed and hawed about it, then when I go back, it isn't available. As I mentioned, I picked up E squared because it was recommended by 2 people. So when I saw E cubed with it, I decided to pick that up as well. It's been waiting on my shelf for a few years. So now that I've gone through E squared again, and the results were pretty good, after I finish a few of my outstanding books at the moment, I'll be starting on E cubed because I do enjoy Pam Grout's writing style. She's very clear and concise, and although her style isn't for everyone, she's very crystal clear on some of her thoughts and opinions. It's a style that I enjoy and I find easy to follow. So in the next few months, I'll be reading E cubed and giving those 9 experiments a try. Until next time, happy reading!